Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Hey there, Talent Growers. Welcome back. This is another solo episode of the TalentGrow Show. As regular listeners probably have figured out, I do about 3 interviews and 1 solo per month now that I am doing the show weekly here in 2018. So in this episode, I thought that I would share with you something that actually comes up a lot. And unfortunately, it comes up a lot because still so many people do this wrong. And I hope that you're not one of them, but I'll tell you something. I did it wrong for the longest time. And I can assure you that I had no idea I was doing it wrong. And I had no intention of doing anything bad. I had only good intentions, as I know that everyone who is also doing this wrong probably also does. Now, what am I talking about? It's how you introduce people in an email to each other. Now, in networking, which is a topic that I really like talking about a lot because I think a lot of people have such a cringe factor when they even hear the word networking and are doing networking wrong or have seen people doing networking wrong, and that's why it gives them the heebie-jeebies. Don't think about networking as really just building and maintaining long-term, mutually beneficial relationships with interesting people. And when you think about that, it's not icky at all. We do it all the time. We can just do this more intentionally and more strategically. An amazing part of networking is the ability to introduce people that you know to each other. And a lot of times we talk about how networking can be a lot of giving, a lot of doing good things for others rather than asking for favors or doing that kind of stuff that usually people feel pretty icky about. So you're introducing 2 people to each other. It's a very, very good thing to do. But the way in which you do it can be better if you do it in a particular way that is called the double opt-in introduction. So in this episode, I'm going to explain to you what the double opt-in introduction is, the alternative, which I have named hot potato introductions, and why most people do that and what's wrong with it. And I will specifically guide you to how you can make double opt-in introductions going forward. All right. So I want you to promise me that you will not take this as me shaming you or making you feel guilty. I totally was guilty of this too. And I know that you have good intentions. And as a mentor of mine once said, it's only too late if you don't start now. So once you get knowledge about something you can improve, then you can improve it. And you don't worry about the past. Okay. I'll get off my soapbox there. So are you ready to dig in? Let's do it. I know you've gotten these emails. I just got one the other day from a very well-meaning colleague introducing me and another person to a third person. And she thought that we had something that we could each gain from the introduction, but she didn't do a double opt-in introduction. And I'll read you an old one that I just found. I'll try to change the little facts about it so that I'm not outing a particular person. Hi, Halelly. Happy New Year. I hope you're doing well and keeping California warm. I'd like to introduce you to a client of mine, Joe Schmo, who would like to shift from K-12 classroom teaching to an in-house corporate learning and development role. Joe has a particular interest in training, but is open to a variety of scenarios. I would like you to schedule a brief informational phone interview with Joe Schmo to get your impressions on today's learning and development sector and advice on how he might successfully navigate the job market. I would greatly appreciate this personal favor if your time allows. Here's Joe's LinkedIn profile. Thanks. And this is the colleague's name. And the colleague copied Joe Schmo on this introduction. This is a hot potato introduction. Let me read you another one. Hi, Halelly. I'd like to introduce you to my longtime friend and colleague, Mary Beth Geller, who is founder of XYZ Company, a microfeedback tool which is rapidly gaining popularity. Given your extensive work in the talent development space, I thought that you and Mary Beth should connect to explore synergies and a possible alliance partnership. Best colleague. And she copied Mary Beth. Okay, so these are two examples of a hot potato introduction. Now, what does that mean, a hot potato introduction? Let me say it again. I made up that word because I couldn't find a word to describe this, and I think that this describes it perfectly if you ever played hot potato or know what that game is. Hot potato is where you toss a rock or whatever, a ball, to other people that are sitting around in a circle, and you're supposed to not hold on to it any longer than is absolutely necessary and pass it on to the other person as fast as possible. Now, this feels to me like what this introduction does. When you make an introduction of people who are unaware, or at least one of the parties, because I think that the other party was aware of the introduction, she actually told him, hey, I want to introduce you to my friend Halelly. She could help you. And then she made the introduction, but she didn't check with me. And now it's landed in my lap like a hot potato. And basically, it has created an expectation for me from this other person without my agreeing to it, without my okaying it, without my saying, hey, it's a good time for that. I'm interested too. I wasn't given the opportunity. That is the difference between a hot potato introduction and a double opt-in introduction. So let's pause for a second and think about why we make introductions in the first place. And by the way, I also have a very popular blog post about this that I wrote a while ago. And so if you're more of a reader, or if you want to refer to this, or if you want something to send someone who is more of a reader, I will link to that in the show notes. But why do we make an introduction? The idea of an introduction of two people in your network is a way to give value to the others, right? We're trying to be generous with the other people in our network by giving them a new connection that we think will add value to their lives and work. And by the way, I hope that you always think about this before you make introductions so that you're really ensuring that you're creating value. If it comes across as you're creating an expectation or that you're drawing value rather than giving value, this is something that's probably not going to land so well. And by the way, so when you make an introduction to two people and one of them can gain something from it and one of them has to give something, not gain, and you're not articulating that to yourself or to them, and you're not creating some kind of a win-win introduction, then I don't think this feels quite as generous to the person to whom you just gave an ask. And again, without ensuring with them that they're okay with it. So now you've created an expectation, now you've created an obligation for that person. So I think that you should try to always give things that are pure and clear of any obligations and that feel like a gift rather than a chore. So if the purpose of networking introductions is to give value, then you have to make sure that it's done in a way that only adds value and does not diminish any value. This is why I really don't like the hot potato introduction. And even though I used to do them, once I saw the light and understood, I stopped. And I hope today you will see the light and that you will stop too. So a hot potato introduction is an introduction of two other parties to each other that you don't give a warning or preparation to one or both of those parties. So you just plop them together. It comes as a surprise to at least one of them. And especially worse is if you don't clearly articulate the reason you're introducing, the context for the introduction, or why you think it's a mutual benefit. So here are a couple of the things that are wrong with this, okay? And by the way, if you say, hey, Halelly, everyone does this. I know. I'm trying to get the word out. I really want less people to do it. I know that the people who do it don't mean harm. They mean well. And I hope that you will help me spread the word so that we can stop this, okay? Because just because everyone does it doesn't mean it's the right thing. I know that your mother probably told you so when you were little, right? If everybody jumped off the cliff, would you do it? So no, just because everyone does it is definitely not a reason to keep doing it. Okay, here's what's wrong with a hot potato introduction. First, it catches people off guard. It doesn't allow them to have say in the matter. You are creating an obligation. You're putting a to-do in their in-basket that they didn't ask for. And you're doing it in front of the other person. So you're putting them on the spot. So now it's much harder to say, no, thank you, because now you're going to look like a jerk in front of this other person. And you don't want to do that. This is not your personal brand. So now you're really obligated and you didn't have a chance. Now, I don't like feeling like I don't have choice, and I don't think anybody else does. It also doesn't honor their time constraints, their wishes. So in a way, what you're doing is you're saying, whatever you were working on, here's an extra thing to do. So sometimes stuff happens, right? Like people are swamped at work. They have a project that's just totally engulfing them, or they have some kind of a personal crisis that's taking up all of their attention at this moment. And it's just not a good time. They can't, even if they love to meet this person, it's not a good time. So you have to make sure that it's not only a good idea to meet this person and they see why it's a good idea, but also that the timing works for them. Otherwise, maybe it's better to wait. And it actually creates more work for the other people. And no one needs more work. No one does. So let's stop doing hot potato introductions, all right? Let's do the double opt-in introductions instead. Now, let me define the double opt-in introduction. Let me first preface by saying I didn't make this up. Like I said, I discovered it. I don't know who made it up. It's kind of out there in the internet. And once I understood this, I was like, oh, this is a great upgrade. All right. So I'm giving you a great upgrade. I'm passing it along like any other good news that you hear or any other good tips and tricks that you hear. And a double opt-in introduction is an introduction of two third parties to each other after obtaining prior approval from each of those parties first separately. So I have 6 easy steps for how you can make all of your introductions double opt-in intros. The first step is the who. I want you to think of 2 people in your network that don't already know each other but ought to. Number 2, why. I want you to think of the specific win-win reasons why you believe it's in their mutual benefit to meet. I want you to think about this so that you're clear enough so you can explain it to them. I really want you to think about good relationships as always mutually beneficial. And I have a blog post I will link to in the show notes more about what I mean by that. All right, step 1 is who, step 2 is why, step 3 is preempt. You send each person a separate individual email, or you call them, or you ask them in person, whatever the situation dictates, explaining to them that you'd like to introduce them to so-and-so for reasons X, Y, and Z, and you describe specifically the thinking that you did in these first 2 steps above. And then you ask them, would they be interested in an introduction? And then step 4, you wait for their okay. And you wait for both people to give you the go-ahead. Now, as I explained, I'm going to give you another example where I know that some of you are thinking, well, what if they say no? How do I explain it to the other person, or what do I do? I'm going to give you how to work around that. So you wait for their okay, and only when you receive an okay separately from each of those parties can you move to step 5, which is make the introduction. Now, at this point, it shouldn't be something that is news to them. It's really just now you're copying both of them on an email. And because both of them have separately agreed, they're aware of it. It doesn't come across as something out of the blue. And it can give just a high-level summary of the reason why you're introducing them so that they can both see how you're articulating that. But you don't have to give any of the details maybe that you gave previously when you got there okay. And then you wish them a happy connecting. You tell them that they don't have to keep you in the middle of their future correspondence and that they hopefully will enjoy a fruitful connection and that you would love to hear how it went if they feel like sharing it with you. And that's it. And I said 6 steps because step 6 is you actually are going to earn networking cred from each of these people. You're collecting bonus points from each of these connections because in your long-term win-win relationships with them, you've created value for each of those people, not only in giving them a valuable introduction, but also in showing them that you respect their time and their wishes and their agency over themselves and what happens to them, and that you showed them the utmost courtesy. And that is something that they're going to really value because it's going to distinguish you from all of the other people that are doing hot potato introductions. It's going to help them see you as someone who is very caring about them. And this is awesome. So you're spreading good and awesome. So let me give you an example, all right? So let's say you're at a professional event, you meet Sue, you talk to Sue for a while, you learn more about what she does, and you realize, oh my God, she has something in common with my colleague Juan. And you say to Sue, hey, Sue, I know this guy I would love to introduce you to. His name is Juan, And he's also really into this thing that you just described to me. I think you might enjoy connecting and supporting each other in this pursuit. Would you be interested in an introduction? Now, let's assume that Sue says yes. She might say no. This is why it's an opt-in. So if Sue says yes, you say, great, let me check with Juan first, of course, to make sure that he's game, and then I'll introduce the two of you. So here you have planted the seed of what you're doing, which is that you're getting a double opt-in. And this gives Sue the heads up that if she doesn't get this introduction, it might be because it wasn't a good time for Juan. By the way, something else I might say is, sometimes it's not a good time for people. Stuff is going on. It's just not good timing. So let me just check in with Juan. And that helps me ensure that Sue doesn't think that it's going to be some kind of a rejection of her. If Juan says no, it might just be something that's not right for him at this time. All right. So Sue says, yes, I got an opt-in from Sue. I need the opt-in from Juan. So now I'm going to email Juan that night. And I'm going to say, hey, Juan, and I'm not copying Sue. I am not copying her. This is a private email just to Juan. And I say, hey, Juan, I hope everything's okay with you. It's been a while since we talked. Your name popped into my head today as I met this new colleague, Sue. She was really smart. I was really impressed by her. And she told me that she's working on this project, XYZ. And of course, you totally popped into my head as soon as she said that. And I think that you might find it beneficial to meet each other. I wanted to check in with you first before making an introduction because I know how busy you are. So what do you say? May I introduce you? Let me know. Either way, Halelly. All right. So now I've told Juan that I would like to make this offer to him. I would like to give him value. I explained why it is of value to him. And I explained why I'm asking for his approval before I do it. And now, as I said, you have to wait. I have to wait for Juan to respond before I do anything else. And only once I receive the okay from Juan, now I have a double opt-in. Sue said yes. Juan said yes. I can go ahead. Now I can send an email to the two of them together. And I say, hi, Juan and Sue. As I mentioned to each of you previously, I thought that you'd enjoy meeting each other because you're both really interested in XYZ. And here you can add any other details, bragging about each of them to the other, because that's actually a very kind thing to do. You're helping them be seen in the best possible light. Maybe you give a link to their website or a link to their LinkedIn profile or whatever is necessary. And then you say, enjoy connecting. No need to keep me in the middle, but let me know how it goes. All the best. Halelly. Make sense? So is this a little more work than just sending an email introduction to two people without getting their permission first? Yeah, it's a little bit more work. But if we agree that the purpose of an introduction of two other people is to give value, and we agree that now that you realize that a hot potato introduction potentially is a value take rather than a value give, and can be seen as an obligation and not that beneficial rather than absolutely pure generosity, then you know that if your goal is to give and your goal is to do something good, then you have to make sure that first both parties agree that it's a give, that it's a win-win before you do anything further. And now you don't have to ever make an introduction that creates any ick, any unexpected obligation, any unwanted additional burden to anyone in your network. And that, my friends, is a double opt-in introduction. So what do you think? Have you ever received a hot potato introduction and felt trapped by the circumstances or peeved at not having the full sense of what's in it for you? Or it might have even felt like, a yucky obligation that you didn't really like and you didn't really feel like having to deal with. I know I have. I'm sure you have. Let me know what you think about this improvement, this upgrade of a double opt-in introduction, and whether you will take my challenge to make only double opt-in introductions going forward. And if you'd like to take the double challenge, I would ask you to spread the word. Let other people know about this, because a lot of people just have not gotten the memo. Like for the longest time, I didn't get the memo and I was doing it wrong with amazing intentions. And now more of us can do it right. So I hope this was valuable to you. I'd love to hear what you thought. And I appreciate that you stuck through another episode of the TalentGrow Show, hopefully to gain tons of value. because that is why I make this podcast. It is to give you value and to help you upgrade your leadership and communication and career skills. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow. And this has been another solo episode of the TalentGrow Show. I hope that you enjoyed it. And until the next time, make today great.
Thanks for listening to the TalentGrow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.